How do I know if he or she is into me? Is it in his look or the way that she smiles at me? Should I say something first, or should I wait for him or her to approach me? And what should I do if I'm interested, but he or she isn't? Well, we're going to try our hand at answering these and many more questions from our students on MC 101 On the Real. Hi, and welcome to a special edition of MC 101 On the Real. I'm Dr. Beverly Walker-Griffea, Senior Vice President for Student Services here at Montgomery College. On today's show, we're going to talk about a topic that has an impact on each and every one of us: relationships. Whether they're platonic or romantic, they're a big part of our lives. So we thought it was going to be a good idea to have a discussion with faculty, staff, and students about how relationships shape our lives and how students in relationships can stay out of trouble romantically, academically, and legally. So to help guide the conversation, we have with us who I'm going to say is a relationship expert. And I say that because when she told me the story of how she and her husband got together, it was so romantic. So I wanted you all to hear from her. What is a positive relationship about? So we have Helen Brewer, the Associate Dean of Student Development at the Rockville campus, that's going to share with us about some topical areas about what makes that perfect relationship. We're also going to hear from another expert, I believe, Mr. Jamin Bartolomeo, Interim Associate Dean of Student Services on our Germantown campus, Fabian Drain, a counselor from the Rockville campus, and Kimberly Talley, an international student counselor at Germantown. And I want to say, first of all, thank you all for joining me on this program. I think it's going to be well worth it for you and the students that we have in the audience. So as I said, we're going to turn to our relationship expert, Ms. Helen Brewer, and we'd like to get her thoughts on what makes a good, healthy relationship.
Well, thank you. I'm going to put that on my resume now that I'm a relationship expert. You know, as I was thinking about this when I was at home, after 8 years of marriage, wasn't as romantic as maybe the first year, but I thought about 7 really important things when you want to have a good relationship, regardless of who you are. And I think the first one is a self-awareness. You have to be in a place in order to meet that Prince Charming or that princess or that whomever that person, special person is going to be. You really have to be in a place where you're ready for a relationship, where you know who you are, where you know what you're looking for, and so that you can enjoy the benefits, but also you can get ready to roll up your sleeves and put in a lot of hard work to something that's going to be successful. You also have to have standards. And when I talk about, well, what kind of standards? It doesn't matter, just have standards. Because a lot of people, I think, in this generation, we want that instant gratification. We want that relationship to automatically happen. And if you don't have those standards, it can be very challenging, especially when you don't know what you can live with and what you can't live without. And then commonality. You have to have things in common because the attractiveness, the flowers, the romance, it may wane a little bit. And so you have to have things you can talk about, things you can share, interests, hobbies, goals. And they may not be exactly alike, but for example, my husband and I are from 2 very different cultural backgrounds, but we have an appreciation for diversity. We have an appreciation for one another's backgrounds. So we have that commonality. We both are from families that are immigrants to this country. And so that's one of the value systems that we have that we share. And then freedom. It gets harder as you get more into the relationship to give some freedom, but the freedom should really be a freedom to allow the person to be who they really are. Oftentimes as women, we may think, well, he's not exactly what I want yet, but I can mold him into what I want him to be. Almost like the Play-Doh theory, as I call it. Or men, I was recently watching a show, one of the reality TV shows that I will admit to watching, that is part of my home state, New Jersey, near the beach. I won't name the name of the show, but you can figure out which one I'm talking about. And one of the guys had just gotten into a relationship. And he said, she's not perfect, but if we can do something about her teeth and we can do something about her hair and we can do something, then she'll be just what I want her to be. So you really have to allow freedom for people to be who they really are. And loyalty. Loyalty is another really big one. If you know that the person is loyal to you and you also know that you can rely on that person to put your relationship as a priority, not the priority, but a priority, that also helps a lot with the relationship as well. Trust is important. We think of trust in terms of, can I trust the person to maybe not cheat on me, to always be with me? And really, trust is more about trusting in yourself and trusting in what you want. And then lastly, and I leave this last because we always think about this first, is attraction. You have to have an attraction to someone, whether it's physical, whether it's about their personality, the characteristics, but you have to find what that attraction means for you. And so those are my 7 tips for what I think are tips toward a very nice relationship and one that I know I've benefited from as well. And I'm sure maybe my peers.
Helen, I told you she was the expert. Now, is there anything else that you all would like to add? Go ahead.
Oh, I just think, first of all, I think your list is comprehensive. I think you've really touched on some important things, especially the self-awareness. Because so many times we go into relationships with these kind of black holes, expecting other people to satisfy our needs. But coming in and recognizing that this right here is a full-time job, okay? So I need to be able to approach a relationship knowing that I'm whole and complete as I am. And if I do have things I'm working through, or I do have some issues or some, past relationships that may have troubled me, that I am consistently doing the work to identify those. It's not that we're not going to have those things that come up, but if we're constantly expecting that other person to come in and fill those voids, it gets to be a real nuisance and a lot of pressure on that other person. And it's going to make them want to dart in the other direction. And I think the other good thing here is the conversation about trust. And I think trust is one of those things that, one of the first things we think about is, are they cheating? Can I trust them, to just be committed to me? And trust is more than that. Trust involves not going through a guy's cell phone, because that's actually a demonstration of untrustworthiness in itself, that to go through somebody else's things shows untrustworthiness in the person that's doing that. So we just have to sometimes be aware of the expectations we're putting on our partners and see if we're doing it ourselves. We often expect other people to be these perfect partners, but a lot of times we're doing those very things in a way that we don't see a problem with it. So I think those are important things.
About the girlfriend checking the boyfriend's cell phone number.
Yeah.
But also, too, it's also a matter of trust but verify. And with that, I mean, a lot of times people are very secretive about things. Mm-hmm. And if men or women want that trust to be there, they have to kind of be open, certainly within boundaries and respectfulness, but you have to be open in the sense that if you're always hiding your cell phone, you don't want anyone to know anything of your personal information and keeping it a secret, that lends to distrust. So I think it's a matter of, being open and being transparent about a lot of things.
Well, they say that people who have nothing to hide nothing. So.
And I was going to say, we're going to move on off of this topic because we have a lot of questions that our students really want to ask. And so we'd like to start with, let's see, Christina from Rockville.
I'm Christina from the Rockville Montgomery College campus. Why do girls want to get into serious relationships faster than guys?
And I'm going to ask Fabian to answer this one. And I know you're the guy, so you can help us girls.
Oh, the seat's getting hot. In my honest opinion, I don't think it's a guy or a girl thing. I think everyone wants to feel belonged to, wants to be in a relationship where they feel loved. And if you have this sense where it's not happening right away, we get anxious. You may start to feel anxious and do things. So I don't want to say it's a girl thing, it's a guy thing. I think it's just human nature. I can remember growing up wanting to get in, or as I was going through high school, wanting to get into a serious relationship, and it wasn't happening fast enough. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? You know, why doesn't she like me? I'm not good enough, or this, that. Start playing all these little mind games with yourself, and you drive yourself insane. You know. So I think what we have to learn is have to be patient. You know, patient with yourself and patient with the other individual as well.
I'd like to add to that, if that's possible. I think communication. Sometimes we don't communicate with one another. Why are we both here, and what is it that we're trying to do? I mean, is it a one-night stand? Is it a hookup? Is it something more than that? And I think sometimes we forget that line of communication and talking about, here's what we want. And maybe that's where people get misaligned, because one person is thinking this and one person is thinking that, and they never get together and say, here's what we really want.
Right, yeah.
And so I think that's kind of why there's this perception that you're going this way and I'm going this way. Why? Why is it happening?
Well, I think too, it's like, well, what's the urgency to have a relationship so serious so quickly? I mean, what is it that the need is? And again, why am I assigning it to a relationship with another person to satisfy that? We have to really.
We have to go to the next. Oh, I have
Yeah,
a good
because
story.
we have a studio full of students.
Oh, yes, I want to hear.
And we'd like to have their questions as well. So do we have a student question?
Hi, my name is Alejandro Watson, and I was just wondering, how do you guys feel about the extreme stigma that's attached to polyamorous or basically open relationships?
I think, I think we need to be careful about stereotypes and generalizations, first of all. There are a lot of comments that I know as a counselor, a lot of thoughts and ideas I get from students that are like, well, why do men do this? Why do people do what they do? And these are generalizations. I think that one of the things we always have to come back to is being present in the relationship that we're in and knowing the boundaries of that relationship and being respectful in it. And I think if two people decide they want to have an open relationship that's not monogamous, that's what they decide to do together, then they are also choosing to be dating other people. Then I don't see any rightness or wrongness to that. I think what comes into trouble is when one person is not being honest that they want a monogamous relationship and the other person is enjoying this freedom, when there's a misalignment and people are not communicating honestly about what they want. So to assign a good or bad or a right or wrong to it is not so much helpful.
So are there other questions from the students?
My name is Forcha Doris. I wish to know why, when relationship starts, sometimes it functions very effectively, but in the middle or towards the end, it starts falling apart. Many other things come up, and it may end up crashing.
I think that's called the honeymoon period.
That's my same words.
In the beginning, everything is nice and kissy, and everybody's happy with one another, and they kind of go that extra mile. And in my own opinion and in my own experience, then you become complacent, and so there's not that spark, and then things start to happen, and you really start to see who that person is behind what I'll call kind of a mask or a curtain, because you want to make it work. You're putting all this extra work in making this relationship go, and then after a while, maybe it starts deteriorating. And where I'm going to bring back is that communication piece, is really to connect with one another and say, hey, we haven't done this in a while, or this is happening, and let's do this, or let's do that. And I think that can help. Again, you also have to figure out what it is that you're both there for. Are you both there for a long-term relationship? Is this a one-time thing? Is this a week? Is it I'm in town for 5 days? I mean, really, it sounds silly, but it's true. I think you both have to be on the same level, and if you're not, then it's not worth pushing it. It's like putting the round peg into the square hole, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Okay. Do we have another student question?
Hi, my name is Gabriela Dianda, and my question is, I guess it's kind of a comment and a question. You're talking about relationship, and then she said something about the ending, And it sort of reminded me of a TV episode where the person was not a good breaker-upper. So my question is more about how do you deal with the end of a relationship, but the person that you're ending the relationship is not taking it very well. It's like, oh, you can break up with me, but I'm not going to act like we're done yet.
It's about loss, I think. You know, whenever you end a relationship, no matter what it is, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a casual acquaintance, there's a loss there. And some people move better through losses than others do. I think it's a matter of where are you and how much you want to invest in helping that person move through it. If you've broken up through a romantic relationship or even a friendship sometimes and you're pretty much done, you don't want to interact anymore, there's a way to gently kind of do that. But sometimes people, because they're anxious about the other person's feeling and what the other person may be going through, they cut things off or they're very abrupt. And it goes back to Jamin's piece about communication. When you tell someone, you know, I don't want to continue in this relationship, and people always say, but we can be friends. That takes someone over the edge sometimes to think, well, why don't you want to be in this other part with me? And sometimes it means letting them go and being clear. That's the other part, is to be very clear. If you don't want a friendship with them afterwards, to be, I think, clear and kind of peel that Band-Aid off instead of dragging them along because you're afraid of hurting their feelings is sometimes a little bit of a better way to go. Yeah. As gently as you can.
The next question I'm going to take from online.
Okay.
This person is Linsette from Rockville.
My name is Liz Denizard, and I attend the Rockville campus. And my question is, why do you guys get in relationships when they know that they will end it very shortly?
When they know they'll end it. That's a stereotype. Again, I think you have to figure out who and what types of people you're looking for. I mean, I don't know what this person or where this person is going to find these significant others, but let's say it's a bar. You know what the expectation is when you go into the bar. Not that bars are bad, but if that's where you want to go, there's a stigma related with what type of person you're going to pick up with the bar. Maybe if you go onto a Craigslist, I don't have to talk about the stigma related to Craigslist. Again, you kind of know what's coming with that. So it really depends on the environment, I think, and the type of person you're looking for, or you're meeting.
To add on that, also, I think the maturity level as well.
Yeah.
You know, I can say for myself right now, I'm at a point in my life where the relationship I'm in right now, I know it's infinite. You know, it's infinite. So, and I'm happy with who I am. You know,
right.
So, that's what you said. It's like a stereotypical question, though.
We're not all like that.
You know, yes.
So I'm going to ask another stereotypical question that's listed on here as well, because this is probably the one I hear the most from a female at any age.
Okay.
And this is to the men again. Why can't guys stay faithful?
I think communication, and again, it comes back to, where are you picking up these people? Have you talked to these people? I mean, realistically, I know it's easier for me to say, hey, talk to your boyfriend, girlfriend, than it really is. But I think when you get down to it, you've got to say, what are we? What is this? Is it just you and I? Are we just casually dating? And get it out in the open, and then kind of move on from there. If it's not a relationship that you're interested in, then you've got to move on. Right. But the longer you stay on, the more you enable that person.
Right. And again, communication. We can say communication till we're blue in the face.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to think, communication is a two-way street.
Yeah, it is.
You know, both parties, both individuals have to be communicating, and you have to be on the same wavelength. And not making any excuses for men that go off and cheat, but I think sometimes they feel that, okay, my significant other, they're not listening to me, you know, they're not paying attention to me. I'm gonna go find somebody else who will, you know?
And I'd also like to just add on to the question that's being presented of why are men not faithful? I think if you're coming into a relationship in that position, you're bringing that idea to the table, you're inviting that into the new relationship. I mean, I'm asking really, young women here to pull back and think about the questions that you're asking. And where are they coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? Is this your experience? Is this something that somebody else has told you, a parent has told you, somebody else that you've witnessed, and that you've kind of adopted these ideas about relationships? We really have to be present with meeting people with where they are, and each relationship has its own gifts and its uniqueness. And we just can't walk around with these huge stories and ideas and just assign them to people that we encounter. It's really detrimental to the person that's walking around with the question of, why are men not faithful? That's the person that's going to really have the most suffering here.
It's really tough though when there is that communication, but one of the individuals is not being honest. And so I think too, you said, Dr. Beverly, before that women of all ages ask this question: why can't men, stay faithful? And a lot of times too is that we see the signs. Our instincts, our guts is telling us something, but we ignore it because you don't want to see the truth, or you don't want to believe it, or you think you're going to lose this person. And at a certain point, like you were saying, Fabian, it's a two-way communication. You can stay there. And if your gut's telling you something's off, usually that's right. But we stay into these relationships sometimes because we hope that something will change.
Well, I think most people want it to be an easy fix. I think people want to see what's happening on TV. You go up to a bar, you go up to somebody, you give them that pickup line, and boom, it's done. You've got a relationship. It's just not that easy. It is very, very hard work.
It is.
It is.
And I think it goes back to what the audience member said. You have to keep that spark.
Yeah.
From the beginning, all to the middle, all the way to the end.
Hard work.
Yep.
That's true. Continuous effort.
So, out in our audience, do we have any more questions?
Hi, my name is Rukaya Bar. I have a question about family. When family gets involved, when friends get involved, and it seems to come between you and him, like you're working out perfectly fine until the aspect of, will my mother like you, or, will my family accept you? And it's a lot about, who really is accepting of the relationship in whole.
Yeah, and I had that when I first met my husband. My mother is very overprotective, and I come from a very large family, so he had to go through the scrutiny of not only my mother, but all her sisters. And he didn't know what to do. This poor man hadn't done anything wrong, and they just tore him apart. But it was very interesting because one night he said, well, I think I'm just going to invite them over for dinner to my home so they can see I'm a professional and I have a home, and I'm not just some bum off the street. So he proceeded to make a lovely meal, give them a lot of wine. And next thing you know, they were walking around his house, inspecting every room. It was like, because, but see, that the thing about it, he thought it was humorous and I thought it was kind of funny, but really he knew that was part of my culture and what was important to me. Is my family has to be accepting of the person that I'm with, because that person then will be an extension of my family. But as the relationship got further, once we got married, I had to separate out from that a little bit. I went with him and he came with me, and we became our own family. And so it was hard to kind of tell, my mother and all her sisters, they couldn't decide where we were going to live. They couldn't decide how many children we were going to have. They couldn't decide what car we were going to buy, because they had so much influence on my life and everything. So at a certain point, you have to start to bring up a little bit of boundaries with your family as your relationship grows. And as that person becomes a person for you, you too become your own family, and you can't let other people interfere, because the more voices you hear, sometimes that can sway you one way or the other, and then you two aren't talking anymore. Yeah. Now you're talking to your family rather than bringing the information to him, and vice versa. He may be talking to his mom about you and complain, and that just starts to taint things and give people a bad taste sometimes when you're going through ordinary day-to-day things.
Right. I also just want to add to that, if I can, that there's nothing wrong with also falling in love and being so interested in somebody, and that there's a connection, there's a lot of chemistry. And sometimes I think other people's visions might be limited. It also comes back to self-trust. We talked about trust earlier, that our families love and support us, but I think too that we need to also trust ourselves, and that we know when we have chemistry and we connect with somebody, that there's something that's important there that's worth holding up, and that we have to begin to connect inwardly to understand, what is this for me, and why is it so important to me? Even if our families are not aligned with it at first, eventually, when they see that there is a loving relationship there and that person, if it is a healthy and loving relationship that supports one another, a family will come along with it eventually. But it's not their decision, it's your decision.
So we have another question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Amanda, and I just had a question earlier. It was brought up about ending relationships and kind of what happens in terms of communications with the other person. What's your opinion on how to handle breaking up with someone, but you're not sure if you still want them in your life because it might be hard to have them as a friend and then see them move on to someone else, but do you just cut that person off, or what would you do?
Speaking of the single guy of the group, I've experienced this a number of times. Yeah, that's great. Breakup is hard, no matter what. Everyone wants it to be easy, and everyone, like Helen said, you're always trying to think of that other person and what they're going to think. I think that you have to do it as delicately as possible and in person. I know that we've got technology, we've got things like this and text and phones. Oh my gosh, number one, you've got to do it in person and do it in a safe environment. Obviously, if it's a volatile situation, you don't want to be doing this in your home where it could lead to something else. But I definitely agree in person. I don't know if
And not your Facebook status.
Not your Facebook status.
That's not the way to go.
I listen to a popular radio show in the morning and I keep hearing however many times people said, I got dumped on Facebook or I got dumped on Twitter. No, that makes it worse. So number one, in person. And number two, just be as kind as you can be and try to work it out. And then in all honesty, to not lead one another on, I would say you cut ties for a certain amount of time. I don't have a magic number, a month, 2 months, 3 months. But if you don't, and again, I've experienced this, and to say 2 weeks later, hey, I'm going to check up on you, how are things going? You're really enabling that person and misleading them on, oh, are you interested? Do you want to go hang out again? And it's so difficult because in one of my relationships, I wanted to be friends, but we went to such a point that I couldn't. And so my recommendation is cut it for a couple months, then come back, reconnect, and see if you can, rekindle the friendship.
And you broke up for a reason.
Right.
There's no reason you broke up.
And so we could talk about this forever. I mean, as you see, this is such, an important topic.
Yeah.
And so many questions out there. But we also want to really look at the legal aspects. Right. And so we have some questions that we want to ask as well about that. So we have from Colette at Germantown, and she wants to know, and I'll let anyone jump in and answer this, at what point does flirting go over the line and become harassment?
Well, I think a lot of times when things start off with the flirting, it's mutual. Both of you are engaging in the activity. Once it becomes to the point where one person is uncomfortable or no longer is welcoming that flirtation or doesn't want to engage any longer, but the other person still continues to try and engage in that behavior, you're now bordering on sexual harassment. And especially sexual harassment is a term we think of. If you're bothering me, that equates to sexual harassment. And really, sexual harassment in the policy term or in the term legal term as you were referencing before, is really when there's something quid pro quo, something in exchange for something else. So you could, that's the technical term of sexual harassment, but you could be harassing someone in a sexual way and creating a hostile environment where they don't want to come to school anymore because they don't want to see you. Right. They don't want to go to class anymore. So once you start creating something where you are separating that student or that friend or whomever from the institution or from a certain place, a workplace, then you're bordering now into harassment. So the main thing to remember is the unwelcome piece. And the continuation of that behavior, even though someone has either said to you, I don't like when you do that, or given you that body language. And the other thing to really be careful too is that not everyone can read social cues. And that's another really important piece, is that sometimes people with certain disabilities are unable to read the body language that says, get away from me. And so they continue to engage in that behavior because until you've told them, stop bothering me, stop following me, they can't pick up on that. So, those are just some things to think about.
And to add on to that too, but when you hear the word sexual harassment, we probably think of a male approaching a female. It goes both ways, So a female could be sexually harassing a male, and you have to take into consideration, I was thinking of when Helen said, cultural, we have a lot of international students from various cultures, and and their culture being up real close is normal, but here, like, they get slapped in the face,
And then too, not only male to female and female to female, but same gender harassment is also another form of harassment as well.
And just because you say it to somebody and they don't report it, if somebody hears it externally, that could also be considered harassment, and they can submit a report or whatever it is to the authority.
Right.
Here's another question that's from the online that I've had variations of this throughout my career in higher education. And so I'm going to frame it my way.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, my teacher is so fine. I want to go after him or her. Is that appropriate?
Depends how fine he is. No, I'm kidding. No. You bring up a good point.
Yeah.
We're in a college environment. We're all adults. And there are some people who are very, very, very attractive that just draw people in. But what we want to remember when that's happening is who has what responsibilities.
Exactly.
The faculty member is in a position where they have some authority, they have authority over their class, and they have power and influence over the outcome of your academic standing at our college. And so they have a responsibility where if the student is in their class at that particular time, is registered for this class, they are not to engage in any relationship, consensual relationship, meaning both parties are interested. She thinks he's really cute, and he's like, well, she's really cute too. But the faculty member has a responsibility to draw that line. The student, in turn, may not know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So it gets back to the faculty member in terms of letting the student know this is not an appropriate relationship, this is not an appropriate behavior, or a way for us to engage while you're registered in this class. And we at the college know that perhaps sometimes people knew each other before the student even registered for that class. And so we have ways of addressing those issues, but really when a student is in a faculty member's class, they should not have that type of relationship. It fosters a very negative impact for other students when they see that they could see favoritism happening. It could down the road lead to charges of sexual harassment in terms of the actual technical term. So you really have to look at who has what responsibilities. The student needs to be addressed, but the faculty member ultimately has the authority and ultimately has the responsibility to address the issue.
I have another question. This is from Paul from Germantown. And Paul wants to know something that I think happens a lot more so out there than is reported. What do I do if I think someone is stalking me on campus?
If someone is stalking you, the first place that you're going to want to go to is campus safety and security. They're the #1 resource to be able to create a report, talk to somebody, and make those folks available. We have a number of systems and reports throughout the college that are connected, that allow us to see what's going on. If there is a case, we actually have what's called a behavioral intervention team. And this is a group of faculty and staff who get together and look at cases of things that are of this nature. And then we also have the code of conduct. So if somebody is breaching the code of conduct, this person could potentially be brought up on charges if found guilty. So there are a number of resources that students could use, but first and foremost, if it's a 911 emergency, I need help, talk to your professor first. If it's in a class, talk to any supervisor or anybody that's around you and get to that security. And I hope that most students know where security is on each campus. I believe it's in the CB building at the Rockville campus, the ST building in Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, and the SA building in Germantown. And they all have different numbers. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's important that you know. And there are also emergency phones on each campus. You can pick it up, call, and say, here's what's going on, and they can connect you with help.
And to add on that, don't be afraid to speak up for yourself.
Right.
Don't continue to let this person harass you, and put fear in you. Take your power back.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience?
Hi, Alejandro again. I was just wondering, how do you feel that students should deal with sexual harassment coming from teachers in terms of making lewd remarks or anything of that nature?
We have a process at the college whereby if any student feels that they have been a victim of sexual harassment, we have two avenues that they can pursue. One is that you can go to your Dean of Student Development, or your Dean of Student Services, to report the matter, and so that it can be looked into. But at the same time, we have an Office of Equity and Diversity, and any student that feels that they're being sexually harassed can submit a report so that an investigation can be initiated. The really important part to know about that investigation is that as much as possible, it will remain confidential. Meaning that your information will not be disclosed. This is a very private matter, and it's done in a way to make sure that if you are being harassed, that the harassment stops, to put you in an environment where you feel comfortable and that you feel safe. But there is an investigation that takes place. The other important part about that is whether someone, now we talked about sexual harassment meaning something in exchange for something else. Whether you engaged in the activity that was being solicited of you and benefited, meaning maybe you got that A because you did X, Y, and Z, or you refused it and then you got a bad grade as a result. No matter whether or not you engaged in it or not, you still can be the victim of sexual harassment and still have rights. And so the Office of Equity and Diversity will make sure that you know what those rights are and then in turn follow the process. But it's a really serious matter, and students are often very afraid to report. They don't want their name as part of it. But if it's happening to you, it's likely going to be happening to somebody else, and we really need to know because we need to stop it immediately.
Any other questions from the audience?
Rukaya, I have a question about witnessing something. Like, for instance, a lot of attitudes nowadays are like, that's none of my business. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing. I'm not about to get involved into anything else that doesn't concern me. So I guess the question is like, what if you witness something of someone else being harassed or someone else getting, feeling uncomfortable, or they come to you personally as a friend and are like, I really don't like this, but please don't tell anybody. That's how everyone acts nowadays, I guess.
Well, actually, Helen and I are both chairs of what's called, which I alluded to earlier, the Behavioral Intervention Team on Rockville campus, and I'm at the Germantown campus. And on every icon, on every desktop, there's an icon. It has a little picture of an M with a purple circle around it. And it's called Incident Report. And what it allows you to do is to click on it and report an incident if you want, and to be able to say, here's what I saw and here's what happened. And then from there, what will happen is the faculty and the staff and the members of the BIT team on that campus will review it, and then they'll make an assessment as needed. It may eventually go to what's called our Code of Conduct, where the deans of student services would pick it up if they feel like it's a threat or it's breaking the I don't want to say the law, but the code of the college. Then it may get to that point. Does that kind of answer what you're? Okay.
But I think it's I'm
sorry.
But there's other pieces to that too. That you've gotten to the reporting part. The other part is there's the person who disclosed that information to you, if it's that scenario, feel comfortable. I think it's important to have a conversation with that individual because they've already potentially been victimized one way. And now they're feeling like their stuff is being put out there without their consent, sometimes without their knowledge. So it's really important to have a conversation. I don't know if that's what you all were going to say.
I was going to say, if I was in a situation, I was getting harassed, and I see somebody walking past me and I kind of give them eye contact, I would hope that they would go and get help from me. As you alluded to earlier, sometimes we have a tendency going, that's not my business, I'm staying out of that. I think that we do have an obligation, we have obligations as counselors to report certain things,
And just, I also would like to encourage students that are, with your friends, and when you see something, or if a friend reports something to you or tells you something in confidence and says, please don't tell anybody, don't play role of therapist counselor. You can give advice to say, okay, let's go I'm so glad you told me, I really think we should get some help with this, and go with them to counseling and advising or something. But a lot of times we think that to be a good friend means that we are the person that they can come to for everything, and I will get you through this, you can lean on me. But there are people that go to college and get specialized training in helping people specifically in whatever the issue is. And there are strategies and all types of things that can help people to get through difficult things. So it's also important to know that you can be of assistance, but to a certain point, and that it is really important to help that friend get the help they need by not trying to endure it yourself. It's not your responsibility to be somebody else's counselor.
Well, I think that this has just been an excellent, excellent conversation, one that could go, as we said earlier, on and on and on, and I wish we had more time, but our time is almost over. So I'd like to give each one of our panelists the ability to kind of have some final words of their thoughts about relationships and what our students really need to know. So we'll start with Kimberly.
Thank you. I appreciate having been here today. I think I really just want to encourage each of you, whether it's relationships, romantic relationships, or with your professors or your parents or sisters or brothers, it's really important to spend time knowing yourself. You know, get to know what you love, get to know what's acceptable for you in a relationship, get to know what that gut feeling is when something doesn't feel right. Inquire within, because we project so much on other people, expecting them to somehow take on things that we don't even begin to understand ourselves. So how can somebody else understand what you're going through if you haven't sat with it long enough? So my first thing I always say about relationships is the most important relationship is here, and to make sure that we are taking good care of ourselves so that we can be in a relationship in a healthy, supportive, and loving way.
I'm going to add on to what Kimberly said. You know, it's important to be here, and once you are here, again, I'm going back to that communication thing. It is very important to make sure you have an open line of communication, no matter what the topic is, no matter how grueling the conversation may be. It's very important to voice your thought and to hear your significant other's voice as well, because without communication, everything is going to go down the drain. So communication, communication, communication.
No pun intended there. Well, you took mine, but I wore this shirt because of its color. It's gray, because a lot of this stuff is gray, but it doesn't have to be. It can be black and white if you do communicate and you set it up so that you know what you're getting into, so that you have an understanding. And so when there are things that happen in the future, you know what's going on because you have communicated with them. It's not like TV. That is my number one thing. I have students come in counseling sessions and they say these things that I want to do this and do this and do this. And I say, how do you know you want to do it? Because I saw it on TV. And while it's great, it's not realistic. So communicate and see what's right for you, I guess is my message.
I think they took all the good ones and left the last for me. I really think that you bring up a great point, Jamin, in that there is no fairy tale. So there's not going to be roses delivered to your home every day and champagne and other kinds of things. You really have to know that there's a reality to relationships. There's hard work to relationships, but the benefit can be so fruitful if you really invest your time in it, if you really invest your energy. But all of the things combined, making sure that you're ready, making sure that you communicate, making sure that you're open about what the expectations are all very important. And lastly, I would just say having standards is important. And I think a lot of times we forget about that. But when you do have those standards and you do hold on to them, they are, at least for me, they came out very well. So I would just encourage you to have those standards, but you need to know who you are before you'll know what standards are good for you.
I'd like to thank our guests from MC's Student Services offices for their excellent information and advice. And if you want to get more personal relationship information and advice, please visit the counseling and advising offices on each one of our campuses. As you can see, we have excellent personnel there that are just waiting to answer your questions. They want to do this, they like to do this. And so I would just encourage you to use them. We also have online counseling that you can submit an online advising request form on the Montgomery College Counseling and Advising webpage. And I'd also like to thank our wonderful students in the audience. You all did a wonderful job with the questions that you have asked, and you really helped the program so that students could get the questions asked that will help them in the future as they watch this. I'd like to thank also the submissions that were sent in and that we talked about online, and also the students that submitted videos for us as well. And then finally, I'd like to thank you. I want to thank you for watching MC 101 on The Real. See you next time.